So, hello, thank you for joining me in today's video. It's going to be a little bit different than the normal flow of just doing the kicks and jumping into it. I wanted to cover something that's been coming up in the martial arts board. I hope you guys can ignore the different colored socks, but I hope it makes it easier to keep track of the feet. Hold, twist. Okay, so one of the things that I've noticed people doing in Taekwondo, to preface this, kicking is not easy. We are naturally more inclined to use our hands to do, actual different control strikes or grapple and then throw to the ground, things like that. In Taekwondo, depending on what Kwan you do, there's 7 Kwans, up to 9. 3 are extinct, so there's no real way to learn them right now, but there are still people out there who do them. I happen to come from a Muda Kwan in the 90s. I began when I was a week before I turned 4, mainly out of inspiration for the Power Rangers, but actually because I wanted to help people. So, in my case, I began with Muda Kwan, and then I progressed to Changda Kwan, where as the 3rd Dan in Muda Kwan, then re-ranked up the entire spectrum to 1st Dan, while being tested at a 2nd Dan level, and I was the last head instructor of that particular system, which is an offshoot of the Junri system. I have practiced with Junri. I've managed to practice in Aikido with Saotome Sensei. Love him. In Kendo, I was able to, because I was in the DC area, very fortunate to be able to practice with the Miyazaki brothers. So a lot of the Taekwondo that I do has been somewhat modified to incorporate things that really you won't see elsewhere. Now, what I wanted to dig into in this particular video is I'm noticing a general bad habit in Taekwondo of when people are kicking, that they drop their hands or they completely lose their guard in some capacity to get the kick off. Now, these are sloppy, because I'm not used to doing it in that incorrect fashion. I was trained that if you drop your hands, you got to keep your hands here. I know all the different guards, I know all the different combinations that work for me when it comes to actually kicking, and then how to actually use the handwork. So one of the things I want to explain is the reason people often drop their hands in Taekwondo, not only because of the sports format, but in more general, it's because they haven't developed their core strength. They need to be doing drills, like where they stand on the wall, they extend the leg, and they just hold it for 30 seconds. This works even easier with a partner, but you can also just grab your own leg and force it up. So drills like this can develop your core. I additionally recommend drills. Of course, people aren't doing this stretch nearly enough. How do you say drills that can expand the flexibility that you can actually push? So, for example, things like this, people aren't really doing enough. Now, the other really good core drill that I found to enable kicking, sorry, I'm trying to get to a good angle, is really just that foot lift. Now, I know a lot of schools just do it where they hold it for 5 seconds, but really doing these sort of switches, I usually do it at a count of 20. Verse 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go back to the switching, and you just rinse and repeat, because this is developing your core strength. This is what you actually need to support those kicks. Now, one of the things that I do when I'm doing the 50 kick drill, when you stand on one foot, or even in a normal stance, you are rooting between yourself and the earth. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an above. This balance is a sort of thread. What you notice a lot of the time that I do with my kicks, to set up a new kick, I'll turn the arm to enable the kick. But the goal is you're almost always going to see me switching the hands up. If I have to drop something, you're going to see me crossing the guard and bringing it back. Now, I'm lucky. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm relatively young still. So me dropping my hands isn't so bad. I can still bring it up fast enough that I can I can do whatever I need to actually navigate it. In most people's cases, when you see them doing their side kick, let's take a normal Taekwondo stance, and they drop their kick, it's because they don't have that core strength. They need to know what crunches. One of my favorite adages from one of my favorite teachers is, if you're tired, do 50 crunches. So now we're going to do the actual 60 kick drill. So I apologize for the longer preface. One of the things I want you to notice when I'm doing this is how I'm using my fingers to actually control that thread I'm talking about. This is a more nuanced and internal aspect of how to manage balance apart from just rooting. This is something developed to enable kicking. It's not, how do you say, it's not the most common knowledge that you can use your actual handwork itself to be able to control that thread in your own center of balance. It's all ultimately in your head, but it's also tied to your senses. And being able to control it and feel it like that, wonderful thing. And if you want to develop that sort of sensation more directly, I actually recommend doing non-destructive rock stacking, where it's publicly permissible and culturally acceptable. Mainly because when you're stacking the rocks, you actually begin to get a feel for how that thread aligns between them. And this thread exists in everybody. In fact, there are many positions that people take where a simple adjustment to that thread is enough to put them totally off balance and even drop them. So it can even be used for self-defense applications. In my case, what I'm trying to use it for is to better stabilize the balance, because as I do kicks, of course, the legs get tired and then the core gets tired. And once the core gets tired, the legs get even more tired. So doing this can enable me to offload some of that stress through that thread of balance, even if it means deviating it a bit. And I'll give you an example of how this works. So you're going to see this in almost all of the videos where I do this. I think I'm going to try to aim for, let's go for 30 today, just so we can actually show the exercise. So you see how I can use it to actually pull sort of like a thread. The reason for this, and where I originally learned the principle, is actually in the form Kumgang. I'm not entirely sure if in modern Taekwondo and WTF they still teach this, but the way that this technique effectively works is you reach down, you pull up like a drawstring, but we're still using that center of gravity. So I welcome you to try this at home. I welcome you to experiment with it. Always start on the wall, but when you're comfortable with that balance, move off of it. Thank you for joining me.